His conscience raged within him. Robert was gone, taken by a boar and too much wine. Joffrey wore the crown, but for how long? Stannis, by every law, should be king if the boy was not Robert's true son. Yet Stannis's rule might birth a war that devoured thousands. Renly offered a swift coup that might avert a larger catastrophe, yet would break the natural order of inheritance. Ned's sense of duty to the realm and his loyalty to the Baratheons warred with his sense of moral rightness. Every path was flawed. He felt footsteps behind him and turned to see Varys gliding forward. The spider bowed his head in polite greeting. "Lord Hand, the evening air suits you." Ned stared back warily. "I suppose it's no secret I needed to think." Varys clasped his hands. "Oh, secrets are rarely secret here. You've spoken with Lord Renly. You've spoken with Peter Baelish. No doubt you must choose your course soon. Dare I ask what you've decided?" Ned looked out over the city lights. "I'm still deciding, Lord Varys." The eunuch's voice took on a softer tone. "I cannot fault your caution. One man's hasty choice might set the kingdom ablaze. But wait too long and you lose the chance to shape events. You risk letting others force your hand." "I know," Ned said, voice ragged. "What would you have me do?" Varys's smile was faint. "Me? I only serve the realm. I serve the people who would suffer in a war. Sometimes the realm needs a stable, if imperfect, king rather than the rightful one, if that rightful one cannot hold the kingdom together. Such is our reality." Ned pressed his lips together, hearing echoes of Renly's argument. "So you counsel me to side with the brother who can keep the peace, even if it means disregarding the older brother's claim?" Varys spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "Or perhaps you keep Joffrey, who is already crowned, and remove the queen's influence, shaping him into a kinder ruler. Or you invite Stannis in and dare to quell the Lannisters by force. Each option has costs. I fear all of them will lead to bloodshed one way or another. My only hope is that whichever path you choose, you strive to end the killing quickly." A wave of bitter resignation washed over Ned. "Sometimes I wonder if I could pack my family and ride north. Leave these intrigues behind." Varys lowered his gaze. "You know you cannot. The crown will not let you go, nor will the queen. The moment you try to leave, they would suspect betrayal. Your family would be in grave danger." Ned closed his eyes briefly. "Yes, I know." Varys placed a light hand on Ned's sleeve. "I wish you wisdom, Lord Stark. Our kingdom's fate may rest on what you do next." Then he bowed and slipped away into the twilight, leaving Ned on the balcony, tormented by the weight of his choice. At last, he turned and made for his private chambers. He ordered a humble meal of bread, cheese, and watered wine, forcing himself to eat. Each mouthful tasted like dust. He sent one of his men to request Lord Renly's presence for a final talk. If there was any last piece of reassurance or compromise Renly could offer, Ned wanted to hear it before deciding. Night fully descended. The Red Keep dark except for scattered torches and lanterns. Jory Castle returned with news that Renly was waiting in an antechamber down the hall, eager for Ned's word. Steeling himself, Ned set down his half-finished cup and walked out. Renly awaited him, perched on a bench against a wall hung with a tapestry depicting a hunting scene. He dismissed his knights to stand guard outside, leaving the two of them alone. The faint glow of a lantern outlined Renly's tense posture, his furrowed brow. "You summoned me, Lord Stark?" Renly asked, voice low. Ned nodded. "You wanted your answer tonight. I have thought long and hard." Renly stood. "And?" Ned inhaled. "I cannot in good conscience pass over Stannis's claim. He is Robert's elder brother. The line of inheritance is clear if Joffrey is proved illegitimate. I will not help you usurp him." Renly's face fell, though it hardened quickly into anger. "Gods, Ned, you cling to your precious law? Stannis might have the better legal claim, but a law doesn't win hearts. My approach would spare countless lives. We could settle this fast. Or spark a war with Stannis," Ned countered. "Not to mention the Lannisters. At least if I place my support behind Stannis, I can say I uphold the rightful heir. If Renly fights him, that is on your head." Not mine. Renly looked at him in disbelief. On my head? Stannis will never relent. Do you think he'll bend if the realm prefers me? He'll go to war or burn half the cities to get his throne. And what if the Lannisters align with one of us or decide to seize the chance to destroy both of us? You can't be so naive. Ned forced an even tone. I know it may lead to war, but at least it's a war fought under the rule of law for the rightful claim. I cannot place the younger brother on the throne while the elder brother lives. With a choked laugh, Renly ran a hand through his dark hair. So you choose bloodshed for the sake of law. I never pegged you for such a purist, Ned. I tried to offer you a cleaner way. I know you did, Ned said quietly, pained by his own words. But I have to remain true to my oath. I'll write to Stannis, invite him to treat with me. If we can come to terms, perhaps we can remove Joffrey without a wider war. Even as he said it, it sounded desperate and uncertain. Renly shook his head. You forget what kind of man my brother is. He'll treat you with icy courtesy, then hammer the city with ships and armies if he thinks you hesitate. And the Lannisters, they won't surrender the throne easily. He took a moment to study Ned's face. Is there truly nothing I can say to sway you? We could act tonight, save thousands from the carnage to come. Ned closed his eyes. He saw in his mind's eye the image of Stannis, grim and unyielding, but also lawful. He recalled the Targaryen children murdered in the last rebellion, the city sacked. Was he about to condemn the realm to another spasm of violence? Yet the alternative was turning the law on its head. I'm sorry, Renly. My honor won't allow me to disinherit Stannis. Renly's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, Ned saw raw hurt in his eyes. Hurt and disappointment. Then it hardened into resolve. Then you leave me no choice. Cannot wait. I'll gather my allies. Do what I must. He looked Ned up and down. I only wish you would have joined me. We might have been friends, or at least allies. Ned managed a weary nod. If the day comes when you wear the crown, I pray it's through as little bloodshed as possible. Renly let out a hollow laugh. And I pray the same for you, if Stannis is the one crowned. He turned, cloak swirling behind him, and strode away. His knights, standing guard outside, fell in line, and they vanished into the darkness of the corridor. Ned stood alone in the antechamber, feeling older than his years. Each step of diplomacy had led him here, to this point where he had to choose between two flawed paths. He had chosen the letter of the law, the rightful claim of Stannis. Would it be his undoing? Would it be the realm's undoing? With a heavy heart, Ned returned to his solar, where the flickering candlelight offered little comfort. If Renly was truly preparing to move on his own, chaos might erupt sooner than expected. Yet Ned steeled himself. He would write to Stannis, urging a careful approach, and perhaps inviting him to King's Landing under terms of truce, though that seemed a faint hope. Stannis was not known for compromise. By the time Ned finished composing the letter, the hour was late. He sealed it with the direwolf sigil of House Stark, then summoned a loyal messenger to dispatch it at once. Perhaps it would reach Dragonstone in a few days. Perhaps it would be intercepted. There was no telling, but he had to try. Sleep was fitful. In his dreams, Winterfell stood abandoned, its halls echoing. Sansa and Arya called out to him, only to vanish into mist. Renly appeared, accusing him of choosing blood over peace. Then Stannis' stern face loomed, demanding why Ned had ever questioned his right to rule. When he awoke, his brow was damp with sweat, and the pre-dawn sky was streaked with a pale glow. He washed and dressed quickly, rousing himself for yet another day of tense uncertainty. A sense of urgency hummed in his veins. If Renly planned something drastic, it might happen soon, perhaps this very day. If so, Ned intended to stop it or at least mitigate the damage. But when he stepped into the corridor, he found it buzzing with alarmed servants and guards. Jory Castle hurried up, breathless. "My lord, Renly is gone." Ned blinked. "Gone?" Jory nodded. "He left the city in the night, along with his knights and whatever allies he had here. Rode out the main gates just before dawn, so the guards say. No explanation offered. He's vanished, presumably headed south to gather more support. Ned exhaled in a rush of relief and dread. So he's not seizing the city by force after all. He means to raise an army elsewhere. He rubbed his forehead, feeling a low pounding begin. Alert our men to remain vigilant. The queen must already know. He was correct. Cersei summoned him not an hour later. She was in her solar, tension written in every line of her posture. Jaime stood behind her in his Kingsguard whites, arms folded. Several Lannister guards lingered at the edges, as if expecting violence. Cersei's green eyes flickered with a mixture of apprehension and scorn. "Renly Baratheon has fled the city," she said at once. "Do you claim ignorance of this, Lord Stark?" Ned bowed stiffly. "I learned of it this morning, Your Grace. No one told me in advance. If he plans to gather an army, I am just as concerned as you." She studied his face, lips pursed. "He must have known we'd stop him if he tried to leave with an armed host. Yet we were not alerted until well after he was gone." Curious, almost as though someone turned a blind eye, Ned straightened. "Are you accusing me, Your Grace?" Jaime's scowl deepened, but Cersei raised a hand, halting his interjection. "Let us say I'm only suspicious, but if you claim no knowledge, so be it. Regardless, Renly is now a threat potentially as large as Stannis. That means war will come from both sides if these brothers can't be reasoned with." Ned forced calm into his voice. "Surely there's a way to negotiate. If Your Grace would extend an olive branch." Cersei gave a short laugh. "An olive branch? To a man who claims the throne for himself? This isn't a trifle, Lord Stark. My son is king of the Seven Kingdoms, whether Renly or Stannis choose to acknowledge it or not." She gestured sharply. "Jaime will see that our defenses are shored up. I expect the hand of the king to assist in that endeavor. Unless you have qualms about defending Joffrey's rule." Ned met her gaze, well aware she was taunting him to show disloyalty. "My duty as the hand is to preserve peace in the realm," he said quietly. "If you wish me to fortify the city against invasion, I'll do so, but I still counsel trying to avert bloodshed if possible." Her expression hardened. "I won't surrender my child's throne. If Stannis and Renly want war, we'll give it to them." Jaime smiled thinly. "And we won't fight alone. My father marches with a large host. Once he's near, our position will be unassailable." Ned forced his voice to remain level. "Let us hope it does not come to a siege. The small folk will suffer most." Cersei's eyes flickered, but whether with concern or indifference he could not tell. War always brings suffering, better swift and decisive than drawn out and bloody. "Spoken like a true Lannister," Ned murmured, and her gaze flashed in warning. Quickly he bowed. "I'll see to the defenses." She dismissed him with a curt nod, already turning to Jaime for further instructions. Ned departed, heart pounding. Renly's departure had robbed him of one crisis, a coup in the night, but set the board for a larger, more dangerous conflict. Now Stannis would likely arrive by sea, Renly by land. Perhaps they would even fight each other. Meanwhile, the Lannisters braced for a siege, confident in Tywin's reinforcements. The entire realm stood on the precipice of chaos. Days melted into a tense pattern. Small council meetings, whispers in corridors, correspondences from the field reporting Tywin's slow but steady march. Robb Stark, Ned's son, was rumored to be calling banners in the north, fearing for his father's safety. Lisa Arryn kept the veil closed. The Riverlands were torn by rumors of skirmishes near Harrenhal. With each report, Ned felt the Seven Kingdoms fracturing around him. He tried to remain vigilant. Sansa and Arya stayed mostly within the Red Keep, protected by guards loyal to House Stark, though the Queen's eyes were everywhere. Joffrey made a show of drilling with the Kingsguard in the courtyard, flailing at practice dummies and occasionally barking commands at the gold cloaks. The Boy King seemed more afraid than truly proud of his new station. Each night, Ned pored over maps with a handful of trusted men. If Renly advanced from the south and Stannis landed near the city, King's Landing could face a two-pronged assault unless Tywin arrived in time. Ned desperately hoped one side or the other might stand down, but neither brother appeared likely to yield. One evening, a messenger from Dragonstone arrived with a short, curt letter addressed to Ned Stark. Stannis' words were brief, announcing that he claimed the throne as Robert's true heir, rejecting the bastard children of Cersei Lannister, and inviting Ned to declare his loyalty at once. No mention of negotiation, no hint of compromise, just an ultimatum: join or be considered an enemy. Ned stared at the parchment by candlelight, heart sinking. Stannis was as unyielding as stone. In the days that followed, another wave of tidings arrived. Renly had been crowned by his supporters at Highgarden, naming himself King of the Seven Kingdoms. Word said the Tyrells welcomed him with open arms, forging an alliance through Margaery Tyrell's betrothal. Ned recognized the move for what it was: symbolic and strategic. The Tyrells commanded the breadbasket of Westeros, one of the richest regions. If the Queen heard this news, she'd double her readiness for war. So now there were three crowned kings: Joffrey in King's Landing, Renly in the south, and Stannis at Dragonstone. And somewhere far in the north, Robb Stark might be stirring, though he lacked a claim to the Iron Throne. His concern was presumably his father's safety and the North's independence. The realm had never been so close to tearing itself apart into 4 or 5 separate factions. Ned paced, sleepless, through the corridors at dawn's light, wondering if there was any last play to avoid a cataclysm. But each day, the city braced itself more fully for conflict. Barricades appeared near the gates, archers drilled along the walls. Tyrion Lannister oversaw a grand scheme of wildfire production, or so the rumors said, planning to unleash green flames on any assaulting navy. Varys whispered that the Queen's fear of Stannis' fleet drove her to desperate measures. And so Ned Stark realized, in a creeping moment of clarity, that all his attempts at diplomacy, delaying, negotiating, searching for common ground, had only forestalled, not prevented, the inevitable. The Seven Kingdoms were sliding toward war. His choices now lay in how to minimize the slaughter, how to protect his own family, how to fulfill the promise he made to protect the realm from utter ruin. When he stood at the top of the walls, gazing down at the Blackwater rush below, he pictured a great fleet of ships with flaming catapults, the city gates besieged by Renly's cavalry, the chaos of small folk fleeing or rioting for bread. The summer sun baked the stones, yet Ned felt chilled. He had tried everything to avert this. Perhaps, he thought grimly, this was the best one could do in the so-called Game of Thrones. By time, mitigate bloodshed, and when the storm broke, guide the aftermath to a semblance of order. He lingered there for a long while, until the guards grew nervous at his stillness. At last, he turned and walked back into the Red Keep. He would not flee, nor would he close his eyes to what came next. War hovered on the horizon, unstoppable as the turning of the seasons. All he could do was stand firm, and, if he must, fight to defend the weak and uphold whatever scraps of honor remained in this darkening realm. That day, Joffrey summoned him for a formal meeting, flanked by Cersei and Jaime. The Child King had a freshly polished crown perched on his flaxen hair, and his voice quavered only slightly as he addressed Ned. "Lord Stark, my mother tells me you're making preparations for a siege. That's good. But I need you to ensure that if either of my traitor uncles shows up at our gates, they're turned away or dealt with." Ned inclined his head, feeling the heavy weight of the hand's badge. "Of course, Your Grace. The city will be defended." Joffrey looked vaguely relieved, though he tried to hide it. Cersei gave Ned a long, level stare. No doubt she wondered if his words were sincere. Jaime's hand rested on the pommel of his sword, as if reminding Ned of what lay in store for those who failed the crown. When the brief audience ended, Ned bowed and departed. Outside, he heard the distant clamor of blacksmiths forging swords, the lowing of oxen hauling barrels of grain into storehouses, the shuffle of peasants crowding outside the city walls, desperate for sanctuary they might not find. King's Landing was filling up with refugees from the countryside, fearing Lannister armies or Baratheon bannermen. Disease and hunger would follow soon enough. In his solar, he found Sansa by the window, her face tear-streaked. "Father," she said, turning. "They say war is coming. Do you think Joffrey will he protect us? He's my betrothed. He mustn't he?" Ned's heart twisted at her innocence. "Yes, my sweetling," he said softly, not knowing whether it was true. "I'll do all in my power to keep you safe." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Perhaps it would be best if you and Arya left the city, went north or to the Vale. But I'm not sure the Queen would let you go." Her face paled. "Leave Joffrey? But I'm to marry him. Am I not?" Ned closed his eyes, wishing he could tell her the truth of Joffrey's parentage, the ugly coil of politics that threatened them all. But he couldn't burden his daughter with that. "Nothing is certain now," he said. "Pray to the gods that this ends quickly." His words brought her no comfort. She fled the solar, sobbing quietly. Moments later, Arya appeared in the corridor, watching her sister run off. She turned to Ned with a scowl. "She's crying again over that stupid prince," Arya muttered. "Father, can we leave? I hate this city. We should go home." Ned put a hand on her head, brushing back a stray strand of hair. "I know, little one, but we have to stay a while longer." Arya's gray eyes burned with frustration. "Why? Everyone here lies." He sighed. "We stay to try and save them from lies turning into battles. I know it's hard." Arya clenched her fists. "Fine, but I won't marry a prince if it means living with these awful people. I'd rather be a knight." A sad smile tugged at Ned's lips. "Be whatever you wish, Arya." He hugged her gently, and she softened, resting her head against him before darting away. He watched her go, her ferocious spirit reminding him that some sparks of truth and courage still survived in this pit of deception. Night fell. The horns of the watch sounded thrice, echoing over stone ramparts. Ned sat before the fire in his chamber, turning a dagger over in his hands. A letter from Stannis lay on the table, accusing Ned of cowardice for not declaring support openly. Another, more recent letter from Renly, curt and resentful, reported he was marching north with a considerable host. Ned's head ached with the realization that soon, the host of Tywin Lannister might meet the host of Renly, with Stannis closing in by sea. All aimed at King's Landing, all hungry for the crown. He stared into the flames. "So this is where all my caution has led," he thought grimly. Still, he clung to the notion that it could have been worse if he'd acted rashly from the start. If he had confronted the Queen the moment he discovered her secret, the city might have exploded in violence weeks ago. At least now they had some supplies, some defenses, some measure of readiness. Perhaps fewer innocents would die. It was a small consolation. In the corridors outside, he heard footsteps, Jory Castle checking on the guard rotations. The castle had grown tense as a drawn bowstring. Servants walked briskly, seldom pausing to chatter. Members of the court disappeared into private corners, muttering conspiracies. The Queen and Jaime held court with the gold cloaks, presumably ensuring their loyalty again. Tyrion oversaw some hidden stockpile of wildfire. Baelish whispered with the city's merchants about new taxes for the war effort. Varys floated from room to room, gathering secrets no doubt. Ned set down the dagger, rising to his feet. He took one last glance at the flickering firelight. The realm stood on the threshold of a great and terrible conflict, and there was no path left that did not involve blood. He had done what he could, stretched diplomacy to its limits, avoided rashness. Now, if the day came for swords and shields, he would do his duty and hope that the realm might recover once the storm passed. Perhaps, if the gods were merciful, they would guide all these would-be kings to reason, or at least to a swift resolution. Yet deep in his heart, he feared that winter was truly coming, and its first herald would be war across the 7 kingdoms. He whispered a silent prayer to the old gods for his family's safety, for the small folk caught in the crossfire, and for the chance to restore order when the fires of battle finally died. His words drifted into the hush of the night, unheeded by all but the wind. And so Ned Stark walked on through the shadowed halls of the Red Keep, a tired man carrying the last tattered hopes of peace within him, knowing that the next dawn could bring the roar of siege engines, the clash of steel, and the end of all diplomacy.